You were kind of in this survival mode since you were 12.
You went to the States very early and you kind of have to grow up, right? Because you're going through these cultural sort of challenges, right?
I just imagined myself mentally getting out of the river and observing this river flowing by, and that really soothes me.
You know what's going to happen? They're going to die and you're going to die. It's not going to matter anyway.
You're going to become a monster at some point in their heads.
What are you going to focus on? Do you have the resiliency to kind of fight through whatever that is your way?
This is crazy. I need to step back and understand who the hell I am first. Welcome to the Soulful Entrepreneur podcast. I'm your host, Lucy Stepanyan. Today's guest is Eisaian. He's the CEO of Cognaize, which is a global fintech company. I cannot think of a better guest for today, a more soulful and a spiritual entrepreneur than Al. Thank you for being today, Al.
Hey, thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to the conversation.
I want to start our conversation with your move to the US, which was when you were super young. You were 12 years old or 13, correct me if I'm wrong. But you moved to the US. I want to know why that happened and a bit of the story, if you could share that.
Oh, sure. It was, when I was a kid, I used to write poetry. My heroes, even to this date, are poets. And I was born in Iran. And I lived there until I left to the US. And I had an aunt and uncle and cousins that lived in Norman, Oklahoma. They had moved a couple of years before that, and the natural thing was, I wanted to go to the U.S. and there was I had finished 8th grade and I had this thing about writing poetry and making copies of those poetry, and back home it was you couldn't just go to a store and say make 100 copies of it, so we would use carbon paper between sheets that we would then write. And my cousin said, hey, in the US there's stores that you can take whatever you want to make copies of and just pay them and they give it to you. And that was not the case in Iran at the time. And then simultaneously, Iran was going through the final stages of the Shah's regime, and we knew that there was a lot of students that were being taken prisoner, and at the same time, Iran had at that time two channels, and every night, and there was only I think around 7 to 9 every day, and both channels were these confessions of these dissident students.
Mm-hmm.
And I can even vividly remember some of those faces now as we speak, whereas they were confessing, saying, we did this thing wrong and did that thing wrong. It was like almost they were mocking the regime. And to me, that act of defiance was very poetic. And so that combination of events kind of led me to wanna move to the States.
Yeah.
I was supposed to go back that Christmas, so I basically convinced my parents, and that's a long story. That's going to take 5 hours to explain that story, but regardless, they were finally convinced that I could go to the U.S. to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to go back that Christmas, so this is 78. And then the revolution happened, and things got worse and worse and worse. I think Shah killed 15,000 people in one weekend. At least that was the rumors. And so then I stayed, and then in January he fell. The Shah's regime fell. So that's when my life of survival began, where I had to just kind of fend for myself and find, I worked as a dishwasher and a busboy and that whole thing, and simultaneously go to high school. So that's how my my journey began in the U.S.
So you were kind of in this survival mode since you were 12, and you had
13.
family. 13.
13, yeah.
You had family back in the States, though, right?
Yes, we had family. I lived with them for a couple months, but then I moved out with a couple boys. That's another story, 5-hour story there, but we won't get into that. But so I moved out 75 days after arriving to the U.S., Norman, Oklahoma. I moved out with a couple of boys from our neighborhood. They were older. They were a few years older than me. But I moved from Norman, Oklahoma to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And then I went to a Catholic high school called Bishop McGuinness in north of Oklahoma City.
So I know that you were early on in your career, you were super driven and focused, oriented on the results and products and outcomes. Would you say that that was the result of the fact that you were in this kind of survival mode?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure partially it had something, but even when I was a kid, I was always kind of driven, and I think part of it comes from, of course, your environment. You know, my dad was a self-made man, and always kind of a big driver towards education, and as I always remember, he kept kind of pushing all of us towards education, and kind of was, I mean, as any small child, I looked up to him as a hero. But I also had like lots of stories, right? Because I read a lot of poetry, and I loved books from an early age, and I also, for whatever reason, I always gravitated towards the political section of newspapers, which kind of scared my family a lot. Because my oldest brother was a professional soccer player, so he would read the sports section. Oftentimes there was pictures of him because he was a good soccer player, and there'd be pictures of him and what have you. And I would always gravitate towards the political section. And then also history, a lot of history about our Armenian genocide. Of course, I was introduced. I mean, I was just by osmosis. You hear it, right? 24th of April shows up, and then people are out, marching and whatever. So it was always like those were like impressions that kind of affected. But as far as what kind of how human beings and how I specifically kind of chose that, what is my view of me, right? And what is important to me. I mean, these things kind of partially it comes from your environment, partially is because you have to. I mean, I think you went to the States very early, and you kind of have to grow up, right? Because you're going through these multiple cultural sort of challenges, right? And for me, it was. I think part of it is just being Armenian. Like I read our history, and for me it was like that never die, never give up sort of attitude or kind of value system. And for me it was important, right? Like even to this day, like if I find major challenging days or whatever in business or whatever, and I've had it all through my career, it's like I always go back and say, I'm Armenian, and I'm gonna triumph through whatever difficulty. So it's actually you choose it. You kind of have to choose it. Like, what are you gonna focus on? Do you have the resiliency to kind of fight through whatever that is your way? Because just being human, there's just lots of challenges that comes your way. So sometimes those challenges kind of define you. Sometimes negatively, people can sort of attach themselves to something and make that traumatic for them, where it kind of re-injures them also by remembering. It keeps re-injuring themselves, or even in my case, I mean, I read a lot, I go through a lot of process, but even like, I mean, I discovered this stuff maybe 10, 15 years ago. It's like when you remember a traumatic experience, and you're there, you're instantly there, right? That memory, that's the attachment that you have to the story, and then you're like getting sad about it, and then you're getting hurt about it, and you're remembering it. And I always say, like, drama and suffering is optional.
Yeah.
why would you re-injure yourself constantly? So it's really the process of closure. Like how do you come to closure? In my case, I'm much more future-oriented person, a present and future-oriented person than past. Of course, as you live your past, the people that you hang out with, the type of good and bad that you've experienced affects you. Of course, it kind of, colors your experience of being human. But that once you separate yourself from like deeply attaching to these things, to these episodes of your life, where you kind of look into it and you say, what is the meaning of this? And oftentimes you find that there is no meaning to it.
Yeah.
There was no meaning. Like, I'll give you one example. A few companies ago, and I co-founded and was the CEO of a company called Integrian, and I often would, like, as I would walk in, I had a smile on my face, and I would always like sit down, like as I was going to my office, I would just sit with people and say, how's it going? What are you working on? Tell me something that you created that you're proud of. Like kind of bringing them to an emotional state that wants them to be a part of it, and then they always want to do their best work. And then one day, I had a very difficult conversation with one of my investors while I was in the parking lot. And I came and I didn't say hello to anybody, and I walked, and my door was always open. I walked straight to my office and closed the door, and there was a window. There was a window and the people could see it. And then around midday, my assistant came, opened the door very gently, she said, are you going to fire a lot of people today? Are you going to fire a lot of people today? And I go,
God.
no, why would you think that? But see, like that perception, right? That
Yeah.
Because the human brain,
We create stories.
It's a constant story making machine, right?
Yeah.
And so then when those stories are made, if you don't go out there and debunk it, if you don't go out there and say, hey guys, I'm not firing anybody, I just had a bad day,
You're going to become a monster at some point in their heads because they will
Yeah,
create this
because-
story.
Yeah, and even if when you're just just as you kind of leave the studio today, you just observe, right? Like, I mean, most people are just in their heads, right?
Yeah.
And because they're in their heads, it's also creating a lot of stories, like judgments and stories and stories and judgments and judgments. So at the end of the day, you're left with all these things that are at a dimension that you can't transform, because that's what you're at. But if you sort of understand that is the human condition that you're dealing with, then you can just relax and say, you know what, yeah, maybe that person had a bad day, or if somebody cuts you off, I mean, I'm not saying I was always like this, but somebody cuts me off right now, unless it's like, I mean, of course you get startled, like, you're going to die or whatever, but then you're like, who knows what's going on in that guy's head?
Oh, absolutely. Right? Absolutely. When I sometimes I'm overwhelmed with thoughts, as we all are, and I catch myself, I'm in this whirlpool of different thoughts that then evoke emotions, and then I'm just like this person who is deeply engrossed in some thinking. What I've learned to do is I imagine the thoughts as a stream of water, or like a river.
Yeah.
And then when I do, I say, okay, get out of the river. I just imagine myself mentally getting out of the river and observing this river flowing by, and that really soothes me. And then at that point, I also notice other people who are in their head, and I see them frowning, or they're just walking and they're very focused, or they're in their phones, and I'm like, yeah, this is me from the side when I'm inside my head.
Yeah, and I think as entrepreneurs, it's so, because, entrepreneurs touch a lot of people, right? They're talking to a lot of people, both internal to their organization, then their families. And, to be an entrepreneur is almost like you got to be a little crazy, right? To begin with, right?
100%.
To kind of go, because the level of risk is
sure.
The level of risk is so high, right? And like any day, I mean, every minute something could happen. Like, maybe something that you've been working on for a year suddenly is given away by Google or Microsoft as a free feature. And you're like, oh my God, I spent like a year of my life, or a year of 20 people's lives. So these things happen. The thing is to roll with it, You just roll with it because you just can't control. I mean, this whole concept of control, it's an illusion. There's really no control.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you can do is you can control you. At least that's what I do, like through meditation and through this belief system that, you know, everything is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. I'm impermanent. You're impermanent. This building is impermanent. Like, you know, everything is impermanent.
Yeah.
Right. So when you think about that and you're like, okay, like, what matters is these relationships that you have, right? That how were you? Were you like, you know, oftentimes a lot of misery comes from your own disappointment of yourself, of how you
View yourself.
number one, how you view yourself, and then how when you could have done better, you could have been better, you could have been nicer, you could have been more patient, and you weren't. Because oftentimes that's what you suffer. Like, you know, when you get angry with somebody, and that happens to me too, even to this day. Sometimes when you get angry, it's like, whoa, you know, something triggered me, and I got angry. But then that anger then was it was expressed in such a way to your family or to your coworker or to the driver next to you and stuff like that. And you go, wow, what triggered me, right? And so that life is, to me, this continuous quest to get to harmony and acceptance.
I love that. At what point in your career did you decide to, have you always been spiritual and seeking self-knowledge, or there was a point, a breaking point in your career where you thought, this is crazy, I need to step back and understand who the hell I am first?
I mean, less so the career. I think more so it was my early 20s. I started like reading a lot of, you know, spiritual text, and just, I mean, I was never like a really religious. I didn't come from a very religious family, so it wasn't like we were going to church and stuff like that. But poetry, right? I think when you read a lot of poetry, I mean, there's a lot of amazing poets, right? That you know, kind of can express this human condition in such a way that is accessible. Some of it is not, but a lot of it is. I mean, if you be with it, then you can kind of start. You know, I mean, there's nothing really new, right? Under the sun, as far as I'm concerned. There's new methods, but there's no, like, at the depth of it is you're here to have this human experience, right? You're kind of like a spiritual being that come, and that you're working things out, right? You're working things out while you're alive, and then someday you'll die. And so I call it, you're like a parenthesis in eternity. Like, you come from nowhere, or from God. I mean, it depends on what your kind of, your faith is or what you believe in. And I think you basically come from nowhere,
Yep.
right? Then you're now here, right? And then you die and you go to nowhere. They're all the same words, right? And I wish I could take credit for that, but I don't. I copied it from Wayne Dyer. That's one of the passages that really resonated with me when he was talking about it. Is like that understanding or not belief, but revelation to yourself that you're here to have this human experience. Make the best of it. Enjoy it, because you don't know, you could be gone in a minute.
Yep.
Right. I think that's important to kind of recognize your own, that there is this whole concept of control. It's an illusion. There's really no control. What you can do is you can choose to be a certain way. You can choose to process things in a way that is gentle, that is harmonious with what's going on around you. Right?
Yeah. So As you were speaking, I was thinking about identification. So meaning that essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is do not identify yourself with the roles that you play. Do not identify yourself with your body, with the startup and the products that you built, with anything that is in your life. It's not you. Is that what you're saying?
It's not, well, in a way, I mean, I'm just saying that it's a choosing, right? I mean, it's like when people say, I have to do something, you don't have to do anything. I mean, really, you don't have to do anything. You have to, there's only two things that you have to do. Like everything else is really a choice, right? One, you have to die someday. I mean, unless you believe in some of the stuff that Ray Kurzweil talks about, like live forever. So I don't know why would somebody want to live forever.
I have no idea.
Because, you need to create death. I mean, death is there for a purpose. But so anyway, I think so. One day you have to die. I mean, it's funny that people kind of act like they're going to live forever. Like if you're mean to somebody, right? If you're mean to somebody, but at some point in time, at the end of like 5 minutes before you die, you're like, man, what was I mad about that I was so mean to this other human being? That's also kind of on their search, right? And then the other thing is that you have to live until you die. Everything else is a choice. Who you hang out with, what comes out of your mouth, what you put in your mouth, from a food perspective, whatever. What type of stuff you read, what type of stuff you enjoy or don't enjoy, right? I mean, these are all things that this is a choice. You said, hey, would you do a podcast? And I said, I had a choice, right? I could say no. I could say why. I could make it very
I would have chased you and made you do it.
Right. You see what I'm saying? It's like these are things because you feel like, you can be a contribution, or maybe you just like to talk about things. It could be just as simple as that. I had one professor that said, I asked him, I said, actually, that professor had a huge effect on me, by the way. His name was Dr. Richard Reardon at Pepperdine, my first class. And people would call him Dr. Weirden because he was like this alternative thinker and whatever. He opened my mind to like Zen meditation and a bunch of other things. But I said, why did you decide to be a professor? He said, he goes, I just like to talk at people.
At people.
At people in a funny way. I like to talk at people.
Yeah.
And he goes, I also like the sound of my own voice.
Oh my God.
And he was being humorous, but in a way, it's like, some people choose to do that, right? It's why does somebody decide to be a singer? It's a form of self-expression. Entrepreneurs in general are almost like artists, right? Because again, level of risk is so much. And I always say people, I don't care if somebody even sings badly.
Yep.
I always clap. Always. I mean, they could be terrible. I clap. The level of courage that it takes to get in front of an audience.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage. So I'm clapping, even if I don't like what they're singing or whatever, or I think whatever. I mean, it's also just sort of like a judgment thing, right? Judgment call. But I always clap. And people will say,
they were horrible.
They were horrible. Why did you clap? I go, I'm clapping the courage of a human being to get in front of all these other human beings and performing.
Yeah. I think it does take courage to perform. It does take courage to do a podcast too, to be honest. It's super nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But
why is it nerve-wracking? Can you tell me?
I don't know. I think there are just weird fears about failing, about people judging you. Well, people don't like you. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to like your content. They're going to judge you. They're going to say mean things. And when I think about it, I think it's just because the fears that I have that are completely irrational.
Yeah, you know what's going to happen? They're going to die, and you're going to die. It's not going to matter anyway, so don't worry about it.
That's true. Let's have fun while we're here.
Do your thing, yeah.
No, but I also enjoy doing it. I enjoy talking to people like you, and I enjoy doing this, having this honest conversation and opening up to people. So that's my purpose, because I find it as food for soul. food for my spirit as I talk to people like you and I gain this knowledge and lessons. And I think would be super valuable for people to listen to people like you talk about
It's
topics.
also stories, right? I mean, human beings are. I mean, the whole idea of what separates us from the other animals is language, right? I mean, the language without language, it'd be like we'd be always in present, right? Language sort of has knowing language, discovering language, or having language. Human beings have been able to kind of figure out what past is, what present is, what future is, what numbers are, what symbols are, whatever, right? So it really comes down to to me is like, yes, enjoy yourself, because you never, like, even somebody told me, like, yeah, they said, Al, you're so damn positive all the time. You're always positive. You're always talking about the possibility of things, and how even in the worst situation, you should kind of look at the silver lining and stuff like that. I said, it's not about a should. It's a choosing. There's no should. I'm not saying you should be that anyway. I mean, first of all, who is one human being to tell another human being what they should or should not feel or do or like or not dislike or whatever, right? It's a choosing.
Yeah.
And I often remember this story of this very positive Zen monk that it was, and whatever that came, he would just say, wow, this is interesting. And so as they're trying to kind of corner him, like, like, you see nothing bad in this world, you see nothing, like, there's no negative. And as they're talking, as they're like trying to corner him to kind of admit that, yeah, there's a lot of bad in the world and stuff like that, a car comes and just runs over this dog, and just like blood splashed everywhere, and he, and they're like, yeah, is there anything good about that thing? Is there anything positive you can say about this thing? And the monk gets closer and closer to this dog that is just, has been pancaked on the ground, and suddenly he's got this big smile, and they're like, what could you possibly have seen that is positive that
In
you
a
can
dead
say?
dog.
And he goes, look at the beautiful teeth.
I,
So, I think you can. I mean, some people say, hey, that's very Pollyannish and you're just too positive. The question is, what is the alternative? What is the alternative? Like, I mean, we just went through a war, right?
Yeah.
We lost a lot of kids. It's very sad, right? But what can we take away from that? Are we doing the best that we can do? Are we personally, individually, each of us, are we doing something that will prevent another 5,000 kids dying on all sides? I mean, I think total is like 10,000 kids, right, on both sides. And these are kids. These are really like just kids, most of them, right?
Yeah, they are.
And most of them are kids of poor people.
That's true.
Right? So the question that I always ask, like, what can I do? So, okay, you increase the knowledge, that's what entrepreneurs do, right? Entrepreneurs basically are creating opportunities for themselves and others, right? By creating something new, creating a new possibility, right? And I think that's where I choose to kind of hang out versus, where depression is the only outcome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. If we look at the war, the only thing you can be after war is depressed. There's not much you can look at. But then when you can step back and think about what are some of the lessons you can take from it and transform it into something that's going to make us stronger, that's where you need to dwell. Otherwise, we're just going to stay there forever in this
Yeah, because you can just kind of be in that circular thing, right? Like, you're just constantly in that circular thing, and it's a spiral down. And unfortunately, human beings are not very good at. Unfortunately, once you kind of start getting down into that spiral down of depression, it's very difficult to come back out of it. I mean, as entrepreneurs, like, you're just kind of going from a lot of what I call temporary setbacks. So some people will call it failures. I call, or that creates this sort of paranoia, right? That you just always, like, running, there's people running behind you and they're going
Yeah.
to kill you type of a thing, like that paranoia that pretty much all entrepreneurs have, that you have to have, because the market is so unforgiving, right?
It is. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like your attitude about adversity and what you do with it. It's an energy, right? It's like what do you do with that energy? Do you kind of channel it towards, okay, let's kind of like, we learned certain things from this failure, and then let's kind of learn from it and move forward. And that is both at the personal level, at the company level, at society level, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, how do you channel those things? That's what I choose to do anyway. Because at the end of the day, it's, as I said, you can't really control what happens all around you, right?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of humans that have good ideas, bad ideas, and intentions and bad intentions, etc. That, and sometimes they're in conflict with each other. So what do you do with it? So what you can do is sort of like think about, how are you going to spend your time?
You can only control so much, which is mostly related to your inner.
All of it is related to you, not most of it, all of it, right? I mean, you can have this illusion of you're controlling somebody else. Maybe you're controlling your husband, or I'm thinking I'm controlling my kids. It's impossible. You can't control anybody, because people have agency, right? They do their own thing. They don't have to agree with you, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So
You once said something like entrepreneurship is a self-knowledge journey, which I sat with for a while. I kind of did a little bit of a meditation over that, trying to understand, because it's really true to me. It resonated with me a lot. Can you talk about that, what you meant by that?
as I say, there's so many things that are kind of could kill your dream, right? Where then your core gets tested. Like, are you like really committed to this thing? Are you gonna roll with it? Are you gonna quit? Because there's so many. I mean, people that think it's like a sort of like they started and then they got lucky, and then, or whatever, that they were so smart that they went from start to like early customer approval to then later customer approval, and then like boom, suddenly they're
Hockey
like,
stick growth.
yeah, nobody talks about like 99% of startups fail,
Yeah,
right?
I do.
And so that tests you, right? It tests you it's like, why are you doing this? Why am I doing this? And so whether you like it or not, it's a very cathartic experience. You really have to kind of like, examine who you are and why you're doing this. And so that then you kind of start understanding what is my weak points, what are my, then you learn that you get to the limitation of what you personally can do. Right? You can't do everything, right? So you then you see the value of, hopefully you see it right at the beginning, but oftentimes it goes in such a way that you kind of come to rely on a team. Entrepreneurship is not it's not tennis, it's soccer. Of course, in Western culture, they like to kind of, the myth of the, like Steve Jobs by himself, or Bill Gates by himself, or like somebody's got to play that role, at least in the Western culture. It's not in every culture, by the way.
That's true.
It's not in every culture. So in Eastern cultures, there's the group gets celebrated, not the singular leader, right?
Yeah.
In all the companies for the last 25 years or so, I've said, like when you go to a company, CEO is just one role. Like you got somebody that has a role of, let's say, software engineer. You have somebody that's a salesperson. You have somebody that is a marketing person. You also have somebody that's a CEO. So it's, I'm saying, it's not necessarily this hierarchical thing. Especially, I'm a servant leader. I've been a servant leader for 30 years. So, when you think about servant leadership, you're just kind of really turning that pyramid upside down, where you're saying, my role is to serve everybody else in the organization so that they can serve the customers. So you take it out from this, what I would say, hyper egoic, hyper westernized, singular leader. Of course, it matters, right? I mean, the person that's a CEO, you also have to have leadership capabilities. Right? So that's your job. That's your job. You're not sitting there writing code. Maybe you're not. I mean, I always say the last line of code I wrote, which was a terrible line of code, this was maybe 20 plus years ago. I'm not the best salesperson. I'm not the best marketer. But I am I think at least that I try to be the leader that kind of connect the connective tissue, right? That you kind of can, set a direction or, try to constantly generate this positive forward movement because, as I said, there's so many setbacks that you have to endure, and it's part of every company. It's not like it's something that is unique to one company. Every company has to go through it. So do you have people that can sustain the vision long term? Do you have people that can sustain the energy, the positive energy that generate the positive energy to kind of move things forward? Because it's just hard. I mean, by the way, I don't want to just say I don't want to romanticize startups or technology startups, even more narrow. I mean, look, when you go get a job, like you work for the World Bank, I mean, you also deal with stuff. Sure, there's a structure there that is global, whatever, that you don't worry about, are they going to meet payroll or not? In startups, you have that extra. But you also have to imagine, what are you creating? What are you respond? What are you committing to? What are you generating on a daily basis?
Yeah. No, that's true, but I also resonate a lot with the idea of the CEO or the founder being the connective tissue. I think it's so true. Would you say that entrepreneurs are jack of all trades versus they are very good at some one thing, or is that more relevant?
No, I mean it's actually you have to have multiple talents, right? I mean, you might have a superpower, right? I mean, there's some people that are amazing coders or amazing designers in the initial stages, but at some point in time, you have to graduate and kind of pass the baton because your role in the initial stages, everybody does everything, right? You're just like whatever. But as the company matures, as you get to a certain level of maturity or size, then your role changes, and it's clear that a lot of companies that do not scale to that new level of responsibilities and what have you, like I doubt that Satya Nadella sits down and codes now, or Sundar Pichai, because your role changes. And if you still want to do that, fine, but then that's not the role that the CEO role is, because now you have to develop stories, tell stories, and then you get your work done as a leader. You get your work done through people, and then you yourself doing it.
And I love that, the idea of the inverted pyramid, meaning you are at the bottom, you're not at the top. You are holding it. You are the point of contact with everything else, and you're just holding it. It's super.
Yeah, and I think it's I mean, servant leadership is not, very few percentage of leaders actually choose that, because you have to choose it, and it's not necessarily trivial, right? Because the other way around, it's more traditional, right? Command and control. It comes from command and control. The right side up pyramids, like I say, you do, and
top-down approach.
Yeah. I mean, servant leaders are. I mean, for me anyway, it's a choosing, right? I was introduced to it 25 years ago, and it just felt right. It's like a coat that somebody says, "Hey, try it on," and you try it and go, "Yeah, I like this coat." And you kind of,
it fits.
You just kind of. I went with it, and I like it.
You, at some point in your career, when you were around, I think 28, 29, and correct me if I'm wrong, about 30, you were super successful in the corporate world, and you were groomed to be the next CEO, and you basically had everything you needed, right? You were traveling first class and staying in the best hotels, but you chose to become an entrepreneur, and then this entire thing changed? Because being an entrepreneur, especially starting out, it's like you don't have money to do anything, so you really had to scramble. Why did you make that choice? I mean, other people would think it's more comfortable to stay in the role where you're groomed to be the next CEO, and it's easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was during that process of sort of like self-discovery, like it was myself and a couple of other people that were like kind of like, okay, that, you know, if you stick around for long enough, then this is a path. And then you just kind of do a choosing. It's like, wow, there's, in large companies, you can, there's a standard path, right? That I would say mostly standard path that you can rise, right? And to me, the idea of sticking around like another decade or two to be the CEO or whatever, to me was not that exciting. I love the company. I still love a lot all the people that I worked with and stuff like that. But it was just not. It wasn't something that I was like, wow, you know, that excites me. And right around then, that's when the internet was just kind of blowing up, and you know, a lot of stuff happening. You know, the whole Silicon Valley startup culture and whatever. And I was just like, that's exciting. That's the rate of change and whatever. There's also a testing, right? Because when you work for a large company, is it you that are so successful, or is it the brand that people built for 50 years?
Yeah.
That then you've kind of inherited part of it. And to me, it was always a question of, is it really?
Am I really that good?
Am I really that good? Are we really that good, or is it just whether I'm there or not? And it proved that the company will continue being so. Like, I mean, like, think about Microsoft, right? I mean, there's so much legacy there, Microsoft or Google or whatever. The early team, that's where I think most fun is, to be honest with you. For me, anyway. I mean, some people kind of think that that's kind of masochistic, where you just kind of like all this stress and whatever. But to me, it's that point of creation that excites me. A point of creation at early stages where not everything is guaranteed. Like your personal input is really matters. So I think about, like, the way I think about now is like, even in the case of Cognaize, like, you know, it's like AI came about 18 months ago, and it's just changing everything, right? And it scares the bejesus out of a lot of people, where they're like, wow, what do I do with this and whatever, versus, you know, our founder, you know, Vahan Donias, is amazing, right? Because, you know, just like any new technology, I mean, it's like, it's an excitement, right? Like, what can you do? Not to say that it's trivial. It's not trivial. It's very hard, actually.
Yeah.
So for me, is that is the most exciting part of being. Once the company kind of grows to a certain stage, and it's sort of like, now you're kind of like optimizing, like you're, you know, making things better and creating systems that are better, and you're constantly optimizing the systems and stuff like that. At that stage, I think there's better people out there to run it. But that initial stage where you really like the life and death is really, it's just the drama of that thing.
So that's your superpower, planting the seeds, working with the dirt, with the uncertainty, making sure that you can water it when it's needed, and then...
I don't know if it's a superpower. I enjoy it more. I like that. I like that. That drama to me is a lot more fun. Because it makes you feel alive, right? It's like, you know, you have to. No, you don't have to. As I said, you don't have to, but you choose to, like, be there, and you know that the people that you're working with are also equally charged or excited about that journey. To me, anyway, that's fun. I mean, as I said, most people look at it. And most of my friends that worked at that company, they're like, "Wow, you know, this is like suicidal. What are you doing? What do you mean you're gonna do a startup or join a startup or whatever?" And to me, it was like, wow, it's exciting. Like, there's a lot of uncertainty, which means, you know, anything is possible.
Yeah.
And it just, you know, you work hard. I mean, not to say that you work hard and you're going to be successful. The thing is, you have to be in it for the right reasons. Like, you can't say, oh, I'm starting a company. I mean, a lot of people have this romantic idea of they're in love with the the what you might call it, the story of a
Yeah.
startup, not the actual work.
The idea of being an
Oh
entrepreneur.
yeah. Like I always say, like, it's very easy to become a
Guilty as
if
charged.
that's what you want. If it's very easy to become like, if it's very easy to go print a card and says I'm the CEO. There you go. There's your founder.
Yeah.
There you go. Doesn't cost us $39 actually in the US. I think it's $29.
Change it on LinkedIn. That's it. You don't even need to do
I'm
anything
CEO
else.
of this, right? But
Yeah.
the question is, do you want to do the hard work? Do you? That's the way I look at it.
I want to talk about the idea of originating circles. I think it fascinated me a lot when we talked about this before, and have really done some inventory of the people around me and thinking about being mindful who I interact with, because it really affects us subconsciously.
Yeah.
Can you share that idea?
Well, I mean, think about yourself in the center of a circle, right? And then think about your daily conversations, weekly conversations that you have. Who's in your life? Your husband, your child, if you have child, your coworkers, your, I don't know, your barista at your coffee shop, the people that you regularly see, right? You are not one static, limited person, right? All of these people, when they interact with you, create who you are. They originate you, right? So if you surround yourself with people that speak to your highest possibility, to speak to your greatness, hey, you're beautiful, hey, you're, maybe a boss or a coworker says, oh, even in the worst of, challenging times, you can do it, right? Oftentimes another human beings or a set of other human beings' belief in you gives you the juice for you to go and accomplish whatever you're going to accomplish. Versus if you're in a toxic environment where it's dog eat dog, and people are always like, you're always having to worry about who's going to kill you, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. And imagine because it's all energy, right? It's like, imagine that operating in that environment versus a place where everybody believes in you, right? But you also have a choice, right? Who do you surround yourself with? Whose advice do you listen to? Which books do you read? Which podcasts do you read? How do you spend your time? Are you sitting there kind of like mindlessly, swiping right, left, up, down, and then like just, after a while you're like, okay, well, that's your environment. What? I mean, it's very predictable what you're gonna produce, right? I mean, it's like, as I said, whatever that you. I mean, like, as my wife says this, because you can't eat like that and want to look like this.
That's true.
Right? So it's like, it's really about that. So that originating circle is as you're interacting with it, right? Imagine that this is the sources of energy that actually build you up, and vice versa, you for others, right? Because you also are in other people's origin. You're in your husband's originating, so your parents' originating, whoever that you're regularly contacting with, and oftentimes like having conversation with, right? Because you, on a daily basis, you might see 1,000 people, like from the day you leave your house to the work to whatever. You visually, there's a bunch of stuff coming in, but who are you interacting with? And if somebody is in a situation that they are not generating new things, like they're always talking about. That's why I don't really like to talk about too much about the past and stuff like that, because these are just like snippets of what has happened. Like there's a lot of other things that have happened that you
might not even remember most of it,
or remember correctly.
Yep.
Or remember correctly, because it's because as time passes, your memory of things becomes very, very foggy. Like it's like, did that really happen, or did it not happen, and how did it perceive, and I mean, how did it land on you, whatever. So what matters is now. What matters is now. It's just always now, right? And imagine that the people that are around you, that you actually pay attention. Who's around you? Until you sit down and actually write, say, okay, who else am I interacting with? Like in a 1 week, like imagine in 1 week period. One exercise that I recommend people to do is the next 20 people you meet,
Mm-hmm.
ask them, what are you reading?
Mm-hmm.
So if at the end of that 20th person you say, you get to a point there like, okay, 19 of them aren't reading anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's your originating circle.
Yeah.
Like if, right?
That's who
Or,
you surrounded yourself with. So what are you expecting?
yeah, some people will say, well, some of these people are my family, some of these people are my coworkers. Family's great, right? You know, but it's, again, you still have a choice. Not to say like you disown your family, but just by how you interact with them, you can be their originating circle, which is you're uplifting with their. Because if you don't ask somebody, like my wife loves to ask this question, like she'll ask it at a restaurant, she'll ask the waiter, she'll say, what do you love about your life? Now suddenly that whole dynamic changes because the person now is like immediately 99% they say family. I love my family, right? Like that would be the first. And then she'll say, what else do you love about your life? So now if you're kind of in the gratitude mode of what do you love about your life, not what do you hate about your life.
Yeah.
Because vast majority, that's a human condition. Vast majority of humans, the initiation of a topic is a complaint. Oh, the weather's terrible. Oh, look at the person how he's driving. Oh, right? That's just a human condition, nothing original, right? A lot, but the 1 or 2% people where they're like, oh, I'm gonna try to uplift myself by uplifting somebody else, right? That changes the whole dynamic. That changes the conversation. And we're basically a network of conversations. So just imagine on a weekly basis when somebody criticizes you heavily or somebody only talks about the stuff that is like in Armenia, that's very popular. Most, a lot of people, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people will start a sentence like, you know what the problem is? And I used to just be a kind of a gnat and say, well, no, actually tell me what do you think the solution is, and then tell me what the problem is. And they'll say, what?
Flip it on its
Who
head.
does that? And I go, I do that because I'm not interested, right? I mean, the world is full of problems, but the world is also full of amazing people, experiences. Like, what do you choose? That view that you have, what you allow in your purview, defines your reality.
That's so true. Why? Because I'll tell you a short story about myself. When I told you I went on an exchange program when I was 15 to the States, and well, in Armenia schools, the some remnants of communist teaching styles were present back then. Now it's probably changed. Hopefully it changed. But it was very critical. My teachers were very critical. I've never heard any praise. Very rarely would you hear any praise out of your teacher's mouth. I even remember my math teacher. I loved math at a point in time, and then I had this horrible math teacher who really she beat the math out of me completely. And this critical conditions that I was in here, I didn't perform as well at school. When I went to the States, I remember the teachers were so nice, and they were telling me, you're a genius, you're so smart, and you're doing so well. This is amazing. Obviously, I was an exchange student, so this was a new language, so they were trying to encourage me. But for me, it was more like, I'm so great, I'm doing so well, so that means that I'm smart, I can do this. And it gave me fuel to do better. And so as a result, when I graduated, I was a straight A student, like great grades and everything. So same with like how I looked. When I was here, people never told me, oh, you look beautiful or anything. Back then, in the States, they would tell me, oh, you look beautiful. And I felt great. And just this idea of who you surround yourself with, and like, it really impacts the way you think about yourself and how you see yourself and how you view yourself. So I think that...
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's you just, what you're saying is, again, back to me anyway, it's, I always say spread a little sunshine while you're here, because again, you're gonna die. All of us are gonna die, right?
Yeah.
So, and in my past, I've been highly critical. Like, I mean, I can tell you, like, early, because I came from a very critical family, to like, you have to have these grades and stuff like that. Because I think it's part of it's cultural.
Yeah.
And that's what I was like, that's what I've seen, that's what I'm reproducing with my kids. And it just totally can backfire. Like, I mean, totally can backfire, like where relationships break down, because now what you're doing is you're dictating rather than really. I'm a lot kinder and softer and nicer now because of that. But again, these things change over time, and that self-reflection, reading, really understanding, like, could I do it better? Not necessarily could I do it better by beating yourself up, but just asking the question, right? Like that you have the interest, you have the consciousness to generate a better reality for yourself and others.
You mentioned maybe 5 times, you mentioned the word reading. So I want to ask you, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as someone who doesn't have a lot of time, do you make time to read now?
Absolutely. I'm reading all the time. I'm doing 2 things. I listen to books, and there's like a good variety of books. I do fiction every once in a while, but and then if I really like a book, like based on what I hear, then I'll buy the book and then
Yeah.
I'll read it. Like I'll listen while I'm reading it. That's really, and then my books are that I'm taking notes in them and doodling in them and whatever. I'm just like, it's a very enjoyable thing for me. Especially concepts that I really don't understand, like things that are like really challenging for me to kind of process. For some reason, turn me on. Like where I'm like, oh, I really want to. I don't do a lot of self-help. I used to, but you know, I'm like I actually read the Harari, the last 3 books of Harari, which I thought, I mean, I think he's a brilliant historian, and the way that he's sort of
Definitely.
like melts things, and then also sort of like how AIs. I'm reading a lot about AI, not necessarily from a like how do I make money from it. It's more just like I'm fascinated by where human beings are at this sort of like juncture where this is another industrial revolution, which is
Yeah.
very, very disruptive, and a lot of people are not
Industrial
paying
Revolution
attention.
2.0,
Or
that's for sure.
4.0.
Or 4.0 already. I see.
Right.
I'm behind.
Right? It's agriculture, then manufacturing, and then information, which is the internet, and then
Yeah.
like now this is the 4th one. So it's like, I read it all the time. I mean, I think I consciously try not to be a swiper. Like consciously. Like I like, okay, maybe twice a day. But it
And
just
by
kind of drives you.
swiper, you mean like going to
Going through Facebook, going
and
through social media and stuff like that, because I mean, those experiences were designed by psychologists. That's why it's so addictive, right? So, I mean, if you're a heroin addict or if you're at whatever, don't go to the alley that they sell heroin.
Exactly.
I mean, if you stay away from it,
Don't
maybe
tempt
you have a
yourself.
chance of, kicking your addiction. But if you kind of go there, then it's next thing you know, it's like, I kind of observed myself, like, oh my God, it's like an hour. I'm sitting there an hour, and because it's also interesting, right? There's also, they put stuff
Yeah.
in front of you that you've kind of, based on your behavior in the past, you've said that you're interested in. So they've got you,
Yeah.
So
Apart from reading, what are some other rituals that you do on a daily basis
yoga,
to keep
meditation every morning.
every morning?
Pretty much every morning, right? I mean, if I can't do the stretches, I definitely take 15, 20 minutes and just do breathing and just, and then affirmations like, spread a little sunshine today. Because that kind of creates your own reality. It's not, I think it's both selfish and not selfish, right?
How so?
I don't know how to. Well, I mean, you're trying to create. I'm trying to create my reality every day. If I can be positioned in such a way that I'm not critical or overly critical,
Yep.
right? I mean, obviously in business you have to kind of assess things and make decisions and whatever. But if you're kind of like looking at as a servant, you're looking at yourself as a servant, and you're like, okay, you know what? My job is to move the ball forward, but then also create the environment, or at least be a part of the creation of an environment that brings that goodness. Because why else do a startup? Why else
Yeah.
why else have a job? I mean, I know that beyond the financial necessities, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like the human body doesn't need much to survive,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a very minimal amount that, I mean, you could just be an Uber driver, and not just an Uber driver, but you can drive for Uber or Yandex or Gigi or whatever and make enough
To survive.
whatever to survive, right? You don't, like I said, the human body doesn't need that much to survive on.
Mm-hmm. All the rest is like the conditions that we create for ourselves. Like we need luxury, we need this kind of house, we need this
You don't
kind of.
need it, you want it.
Yeah.
You think you need it,
You
and then you
think
say,
you
I
need
have
it.
to do it, and then like there's all these sort of social pressures of what do you want to create and what type, and then also like your own self-view, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I wear these pair of glasses and not this other pair of glasses? And like it, not to make a value judgment. Like I used, in college I used to be part of the fashion board. Like so, how I looked and what I wore, the brands I care. In my early 20s was very important.
Mm-hmm.
No, I couldn't care less. I recently just got rid of like 80% of my stuff and don't miss it all. And I continues to get rid of stuff. Like minimalism is like much more enjoyable to me than acquisition of a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So like people say, it's your birthday, what should we bring? I go, nothing, just bring your stuff.
Yeah.
Even liquor, again, like alcohol, which used to be such a central thing for me to like have an enjoyable, I don't even drink anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that that's, by the way, I'm not saying
You're not
should,
judging.
don't should, nothing. I mean, like if you're into it, may the force be with you. I don't have any, like literally I have no value judgment on these things. But for me, simplifying also allows you to take that energy that you have to worry about things that you, like too many things that you own and they have to worry about and insure and whatever. And all that energy can go into creation. All that energy can go into generation.
Self-awareness.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. The things that surround us that we have, they take energy.
Of course.
The more you have, the more energy they take, and you accumulate more stuff, and then at some point you lose yourself in that stuff.
And I learned that thing, by the way, from that professor that I was telling you. It was like, you don't need that much. And I was like, well, I need to drive this car or whatever. He's like, why? You don't need it. You want it. I get it that you want it. Want it. It's not a problem. Want it.
Yeah.
He goes, you know what? You go get it, and then within 2 months, you're tired of it. You're like,
Yeah.
I want this other thing. So do you want to be a slave to that thing of wanting? Or do you want to kind of like go deeper, go inside and say, like, how can I get to a peace of mind, right? How can I be of service? Then that's where the service thing comes from, because at some point in time, you get to a point where the accumulation of more, by the way, again, no value judgment, by the way. Some
Yeah.
people say, I want to start a company, make a lot of money, then God be with you, good luck. Because hopefully you'll succeed and you'll bring some value to society, right? Or some products that people will enjoy using and it'll make their lives better and whatever. But I personally, from my standpoint, consciously, I've never been part of producing stuff just for consumption. It's really been around, will this product, will this service make things better? Like what Cognaize is doing right now, right? It's finance, right?
Yeah.
The stuff that we're doing, like every human being in the world has to bank or has to do like finance. Most people think it's just about money, but that's the lubrication of society, right?
Yep.
So if you can make that efficient so that people will get the loan that they need, or maybe there'll be better information for financial decisions. It affects everything, whether a bridge gets financed or not, whether a road gets financed or not. All of that stuff is just based on like making these types of decisions easier.
Yeah.
So there has to be, for me anyway. Some entrepreneurs don't care, like they'll create something, and there's not, again, no value judgment. But what drives me is like, does this make society better or not?
Yeah. Even a small loan to woman who is abused in a relationship, if she gets access to finance, she can create a better life for herself. So finance absolutely is a lubricant of society. I agree with that.
Touches everything.
Love that. Thank you so much, Al. I cannot believe that we had an hour pass by so fast. I didn't even realize that. But I appreciate you, and thank you for being soulful and sharing so much knowledge with me today.
Thanks for the invitation. Thank you.